Buongiorno. Prima di tutto, visto che siamo in tanti e vedo qualcuno che è in piedi, potete anche venire qua più davanti, c'è ancora un po' di spazio, non ci sono mica problemi. Ok? Se c'è qualcuno che volessi, c'è posto di questi qua nei due fianchi, qua davanti, senza nessun problema, ok? E poi mi sembra che stanno anche organizzando chi volessi nella sala sopra di poter vedere e sentire anche quello che facciamo qui. Ok? Vorrei innanzitutto cominciare con una brevissima preghiera che tanti di voi conoscete, dove è il momento nel quale ringrazio i miei maestri, in particolar modo Lama Michel Rinpoche e tutti gli altri maestri,
have a prayer.
Perché se c'è qualcosa che si possa condividere oggi è perché qualcuno a me l'ha trasmesso.
Where we thank
Quindi la gratitudine è una qualcosa in
my
generale molto
masters.
importante e per me
Gratitude is very
specialmente ci
important,
tengo
and
tanto.
it's
Quindi
really
comincerò con questa
it's
breve
really important.
preghiera,
So
la
we'll
prima
start with this
parte in
very brief
tibetano, la seconda
prayer.
parte in
The
sanscrito.
first part
Chi
is
la
in
conosce può anche seguire insieme.
Tibetan, and then Sanskrit. If you know, you can follow.
Lochoyo sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngoda pelge drolora zampe zeparche palden lame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumatimo Nishasane Kar Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Pakyuke kudan dagi alu pakyuke sundan dagi anga pakyuke tukdan dagi ten yerme çıktı çingi alu makyuke kudan dagi alu makyuke Dagi anga ma kyuke tudan dagi ye ten yerme çıktı çingi alo Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha Sangye chedan soge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sanam ki drola pinchra sangye drubra shua sangye chedan soge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sanam drola pinchra sangye drubra shua sangye chedan soge chonamla chancho pardo dani kyapsu Dagi jinso gibe sonam, drola pinchra sangye druparash.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and
Sangha
Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. They've just told me that given that there's so many of us here, those who'd like, there's the room upstairs with a screen, and it's possible to watch from up there. But if you'd like to stay close, you can stay here too. So let's start from the beginning. There's something that we can give many names to, but something that really goes beyond words, that is present in each one of us. Something that it's a kind of strength, force, that which has us do what we do, a kind of force within us. In human beings, and it exists also within animals, within every living or a sentient being, that any being that has a mind. It's this strength, like I said before, that makes us do what we do, but it actually moves the world. It's responsible for inventions, the simplest of things, eating, but also wars. And this strength, this force, sepa in Tibetan, translated as craving. Craving understood as desire, but let's set aside the word desire. It's a strength within. It's a strength of attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering. There's nothing, there's no one. No one is attracted to suffering and has aversion to happiness. Everyone, independently of the social context, religion, age, independently of any aspect, we all want to be happy and we don't want to suffer, and I think we'd all agree on this. And this is what moves us. So when we wake up in the morning, but actually even during the night, somehow we're looking, we're seeking, we want to be happy, and this is wonderful, and there's not much alternative. This is how we're made. I remember once one of my masters, I was in India, Genlakpala. I was looking outside, we lived in the countryside, in the south of India, and there were cows, and he said, you see, if one lives life just to survive, avoiding sufferings, looking for pleasures, what difference is there between us and a cow? I said, explain better. And he said, well, you see that cow, when it's really hot, what does the cow do? Does the cow stay in the hot sun, or does he look for shade? He goes to the shade. He tries to avoid suffering. And if there's something to eat, if he needs to graze and there's fresh grass or dry grass, he goes for the fresh grass. So he's looking for pleasure. We're a little bit more elaborate, but the fundamental point here is that we're all looking for happiness. We're all trying to avoid suffering, and this is what is at the basis of our life, the basis of our civilizations. This is what we are seeking. But the main question is not, do I want to be happy? Do I not want to suffer? No, the question is how. The fundamental point is, where do I project my happiness? Where do I project my suffering? There are two questions that are fundamental for us, to which we already have an answer, even if we're not aware of it, if we've never formally asked ourselves this question. There are things that we project our suffering onto, the reason why we suffer, and things we want to avoid, and then other things where we project our happiness, things that we want to get. We all have this. But the key that creates division also between people is not wanting or not wanting to be happy, but what makes us happy, what makes us suffer. It's the simple question. The simple question, why do I suffer and what is happiness? In other words, the question is, at the end of the day, what do I want? This strength, this strong, non-conceptual, deep desire, this craving of wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer. We have the second part called lempa, which is often translated as attachment. That is the part where I direct, where do I grasp? What do I grasp at to not suffer and to be happy? And this manifests as what we call desire, attachment, like what I want. And there's an important phrase from the sixth Dalai Lama, an important person in Buddhism. He was one of the most important in Tibet. There was a lot of division at the time when he was alive, and at that time, Tibet was like a feudal system, and there were constant wars between one land and another, and he was able to unify this. This is the fifth Dalai Lama. That was the fifth Dalai Lama, and so the sixth Dalai Lama was going to be the king. So we can see how important the sixth Dalai Lama was going to be. But unfortunately, when the sixth Dalai Lama started to form him, he did not want at all this responsibility, and he used to run away from the Potala. And there you can even see today these yellow houses around the Potala, and those were the houses where his girlfriends lived. And so very young, he ran away from everything. He didn't want to be king, he didn't, nothing, but he was very, very famous actually for his poems. He was an important poet. And in one of his poems, there are two actually, where he writes something very important. It's a very important phrase that really touched me. He says, in one poem he's talking to one specific woman, and in another poem he's talking to women generally. If I desired enlightenment as much as I desire women, I'd already be enlightened. So, if I desired enlightenment as much as I desire women, I'd already be enlightened. And then in another poem, in another poem, he spoke to a woman in particular. I imagine that it was first to all women, and then he chose one special one. So if I desired enlightenment as much as I desire you, I'd already be enlightened. You know, but when we fall in love with someone, with something, with oneself, that moment of falling in love, when we're in love, how often do we think about how often do we think about that object of love? Once I asked a friend who was crazy in love with someone, and I asked her this question, and she said, I think about him only once, but it never ends. So when we want something, when we fall in love with something, there are this objective desire. When we have passion for something, we put energy into that. We don't check to see if it's tiresome, not tiresome. We do everything possible to get it. And so the fundamental question at the basis of everything is, what what is it that I want? What do I want?
Perché a secondo di quello
Because
che voglio è
according
dove
to
io
what I
metto la
want,
mia
that's where
energia.
I'm going to put my
E a secondo
energy.
di dove
And
metto la mia
according to where I put
energia
my
è quello
energy,
che otterrò nella vita.
that's what I'm going to get in my life.
No? Ed è una domanda
And
che
it's a question,
stranamente non ci
strangely,
facciamo spesso.
strangely, it's a question that we don't
Noi molto spesso
ask ourselves
cresciamo, viviamo
often.
in una
Often
società
we grow up
dove
and we live in a
che cosa ci fa
society
soffrire e
where
dove dobbiamo proiettare per la felicità ci viene in qualche modo trasmesso, non voglio dire imposto, ma ci viene già trasmesso.
what we're
In
supposed
un modo
to
anche
desire is
non verbale,
handed down in a non-verbal
non è un
way.
qualcosa
It's
che
not
viene detto,
something
questo è la
that
felicità, soffri
is
per
is
questo.
is
Però ci
said
viene trasmesso.
openly, like this is
Ok?
this is suffering
Noi
and this
abbiamo
is why you
questo modo di
suffer and this
credere
is
che
happiness and this
se
is why you
abbiamo più
should be
soldi
happy.
saremo più felici
I
o
mean,
no?
do we have this idea that if we had
Qualcosa che ci viene
more
trasmesso
money,
naturalmente.
we would be happier?
Per
I mean, it's
questo
something
io
that's
volevo
transmitted in society.
velocemente oggi,
So
perché è
for
una
this,
cosa
very
breve,
quickly,
se
because
no alla fine possiamo stare qua tutta la giornata,
very
ma
quickly,
facciamo una
because
cosa
today we
breve.
don't have a lot of time,
Vedere
I
insieme
wanted to see
dove
together
proiettiamo la
where
nostra felicità
we project our
e se
happiness
funziona,
and if that works
e dove
for us.
proiettiamo la nostra sofferenza se
And
funziona,
where do we
e
project
qual è
our
l'alternativa che
suffering
Buddha
and
ci ha
if
trasmesso.
that works? And what's the alternative? What
Ok?
did Buddha transmit?
Una volta qualcuno
Once
si racconta che
it's
qualcuno venne
said
da
that
Buddha
someone
e gli
went
chiese
to Buddha and asked
cosa Buddha aveva da dire sui dei.
what Buddha had to say about gods.
Ricordiamoci che Buddha
Let's
viveva in
remember that
India
Buddha
più di
lived in India
2500
more
anni
than
fa, ormai quasi
2,500 years
2600 anni
ago,
fa,
about 2,600 years ago by
e
now.
in quel
And in
periodo
that
l'India era un
period,
paese con la religione principale politeista.
India was a
E
polytheistic
c'erano tantissime
religion.
tradizioni
Many,
religiose,
many,
spirituali in India,
many
alcuni
spiritual
avevano un
religious
dio, altri
traditions.
tanti dei e
Some
così
had
via.
one
E
god,
quando sono venuti
some
a
had
chiedere a
many.
Buddha, Buddha
And when
cosa
they asked
pensava
Buddha what
di un
he
dio, di
thought
tanti dei,
of one
Buddha
god, many
rispose:
gods, his answer was,
io non sono qui
I'm not here
per dirvi
to tell you
se un dio
if
o se
one
tanti
god
dei
or if
esistono
many
o non
gods
esistono, o cosa
exist or
sono o
don't
cosa non
exist,
sono.
or what they are or what
Io
they
sono
are
qua
not.
per dirvi
I'm
che la vostra
here to
felicità
tell you
dipende
that
da
your
voi, così come la
happiness
vostra sofferenza.
depends on
Che
you,
cosa
just
possiamo
like your
fare per essere più felici
suffering.
e
I'm
soffrire
here to
meno?
tell you what you can do to be happy and
E
to
da
suffer
questo
less.
passa un'idea
And this
del
gives you the
buddismo, anche per
idea of
questo
what
che spesso
Buddhism
viene
is
chiamato la
about. It's
filosofia di
often it's
vita e non una
called a
religione,
life
però anche qua
philosophy
potremmo
and not a
aprire tutto un
religion. And
dialogo
even
lungo,
here we could
ma
have a
non è il
very
momento.
long
Perciò
discussion
partiamo
about
da questa
that.
domanda:
But that's not our
dove
topic
proietto la mia felicità e dove
today. So
proietto
the
la mia
question
sofferenza?
is,
Anche
where do I
perché
project my happiness? Where do I
l'attrazione alla
project my
felicità e la
um,
avversione alla sofferenza sono come
suffering?
due lati di una
Because
stessa
this
medaglia, sono
attraction
molto
to
due
happiness and
manifestazioni dello
aversion to
stesso.
suffering are like
Ok?
two sides of the same coin.
Permettiamoci un attimo
Let's
di
allow
immaginare,
ourselves for a moment to imagine
senza filosofare.
without
Lasciamo il nostro
philosophizing.
modo spontaneo di
Let's
essere.
leave
ci
our
chiediamo,
spontaneous way of being
Se io
and
potessi
we
avere
ask
tutto quello che
ourselves, if
desidero,
I were able to
se io
get
potessi
everything I
evitare
want,
tutto quello
if
che
I
non
could
mi
avoid
piace,
everything I
e se
don't
io
like,
potessi
if I
essere
could
inseparabile
be
da ciò che mi piace,
I could
sarei
be
felice.
inseparable from what I like, would I be happy?
Sì o no?
Yes or no?
Io sì,
I would be.
sinceramente.
Sincerely
Se io
speaking,
potessi
if
avere
I
tutto
could
ciò che
have
voglio,
everything I want,
se potessi
if I
evitare
could
tutto ciò che non mi
avoid
piace,
everything I don't like,
e potessi non dovermi
and
mai separare da
could
quello che mi piace,
never have to be
vuole
separated
di
from
più?
what I like, what more do you need?
Io sarei felice.
I'd be happy.
Ok? Ci sono tre ragioni
There are
per le
3
quali noi crediamo di
reasons
soffrire.
why we
Se noi
think
di
we
solito
suffer.
prendiamo
If
le nostre sofferenze
normally we
in
take our
generale
sufferings
e andiamo a
generally
vederle,
and we
metterle delle caselle,
see
vediamo
them
che noi
like
crediamo
the
di soffrire principalmente per
categories,
tre ragioni.
we see that we think we
Crediamo di
suffer for
soffrire
3
perché non
reasons.
possiamo
Because
avere quello che
we
vogliamo.
can't have what we want.
Molto spesso
Very
noi non
often
soffriamo per
we
ciò
don't
che sta accadendo,
suffer
ma
for
soffriamo
what's
per ciò che
happening, but
non
we
sta accadendo.
suffer for what's not
Molto
happening.
spesso noi non
Very
soffriamo per
often we
quello
don't
che l'altro è, ma
suffer
per quello che l'altro
because
non è.
how someone
Siamo?
is, but we're suffering because
Quindi una
someone
delle
is
ragioni
not
per
the
la
way
quale noi
we
crediamo di
think they
soffrire
should be.
è perché
We think
crediamo di
that
non avere quello che
we
secondo noi
think that we don't have what we would
dovremmo.
like to have or what we should have.
In altre
In
parole,
other words,
basta vedere una cosa molto
just
semplice
see
per
something
capire
very
questo meglio.
simple to understand this better. In our society, it's very, very clear. Do we have more physical suffering or more mental suffering?
No?
It's mental, isn't
Se
it?
prendiamo la sofferenza
If we
mentale, la dividiamo
take
in due categorie,
the mental
passato e
suffering,
futuro
you
e
know, and put them
presente.
into categories,
Quali sono gli
past,
oggetti
present,
di
and
sofferenza
future,
mentale?
what are the
Quello che accade
mental
nel presente
objects of
principalmente o quello
suffering?
che riguarda
Is
il
it
passato e il futuro?
what's happening now or things
Passato
that
e
happen in the
futuro, no?
past and the
Noi
future?
passiamo
Past and
molto più
future,
tempo a
right? We
risoffrire il
spend
passato, a
much more
presoffrire il
time
futuro che a soffrire quello che c'è nel
re-suffering and
presente.
pre-suffering
Ok?
than
E già da
actually
questo ci
suffering
fa
in the
vedere che quello che
present.
noi
And this
soffriamo verso il passato o
shows
verso
us
il
that
futuro
what we
è
suffer regarding to the
prevalentemente
past or the future
riguardo qualcosa che
mostly has
avrebbe
to
dovuto
do
essere e
with
non è
what
stato.
should have happened but
Qualcosa che
didn't.
vorremmo che sia, abbiamo
Something,
paura che non sia.
something that we want
Ok?
to be in a
E
certain
anche quando
way
stiamo con le altre persone intorno a
and
noi,
afraid that
abbiamo
it won't
un'aspettativa di
be.
come l'altro
Even with
dovrebbe
others,
essere,
we have
abbiamo
these
un'immagine
expectations. We have
idealizzata di come
idealized
le cose,
image
le
about how
persone dovrebbero
people and
essere e
things
quando non
things
corrispondono,
should be. And when they don't
cosa diciamo?
correspond, what do we say?
Ho
We say,
avuto
"Ah,
un'immagine
oh, I had an
idealizzata,
idealized
aggiorniamo
image.
l'immagine o
I
rimaniamo
need to
male?
update my image," or are we upset?
No? Ma come?
But
Tu sei mia madre,
okay,
mio
you're my
padre, mia
mother,
moglie,
you're my
mio
father, you're
marito,
my
perché non
husband, you're
solo
my
abbiamo un'immagine
wife.
idealizzata
Not only do we have
della
idealized
persona
image of the
specifica, abbiamo
specific
anche un'immagine
person, but we have an
idealizzata delle
idealized
categorie.
image of categories of people.
Una madre
A
non
mother
potrebbe, non dovrebbe
should
essere così.
never be
Un
like this,
padre non
can't be
potrebbe
like
far
this. A
quello.
father should
Un
never
figlio,
do
un
that.
nipote, un
A
nonno, un amico,
nephew,
il
a
marito, la moglie.
grandfather, a
Abbiamo le nostre
husband, a
immagini
wife, a
idealizzate,
child.
no?
We have these
Quindi
idealized
prendiamo una
image.
persona
So we
con
take
molto amore e
someone
affetto, la
with
mettiamo
lots
dentro
of
un
love
casellino.
and affection, and we put
E
them in a
cosa succede quando
category.
la
And
persona non
what
corrisponde a quel
happens when that
casellino?
person doesn't correspond?
Colpa sua,
It's
ovviamente.
obviously his fault.
No? Quindi spesso
So
quando ci
often,
relazioniamo
when
con gli
we
altri,
relate with
se noi andiamo ad
others,
osservare con
if we
attenzione,
look
ci
more
relazioniamo
carefully,
molto
we're
di più con la
relating
immagine
much
idealizzata
more
che
with this
abbiamo dell'altro che
idealized image
direttamente con
of the
l'altro.
person than the actual
Quando l'altro
person.
corrisponde a
When the
quell'immagine
person
idealizzata,
corresponds to that
meraviglia.
idealized
Quando non
image, we say it's
corrisponde,
marvelous, and when it
c'è qualcosa
doesn't
che non va.
correspond, there's
Ma
something
non
that's
solo
not
con l'altro,
working, not just
con
with
tutte le
others,
cose.
but with everything.
Non so se vi è mai
I don't know
capitato
if
di
it's ever
andare al
happened
ristorante,
to
ordinare
go
una
to a
cosa e arrivare
restaurant,
un'altra.
you order something and another dish
Uno rimane
comes,
male.
and one's
Ma non è
upset.
quello che ho ordinato.
That's not
E
what I
quello del
ordered.
ristorante dice, quello che ho
And
chiesto io.
then
Dico, no.
the waiter says, "Oh, that's what you
Semplicemente io
asked
ordino una
for."
cosa aspettando una cosa,
No,
arriva
I
qualcosa di diverso.
ordered something and something
Perché?
different from what I expected
Io
arrived.
perché
Why am
avevo
I
la mia
upset?
immagine
Because I had
idealizzata
my
di come le
idealized
cose
image
dovrebbero
of
essere.
how
non
things
sono.
were supposed to be,
Quindi qua
and
io soffro
they're
perché
not. And so I
non ho
suffer
quello
because I
che
don't
vorrei
have
avere.
what
La
I would
realtà
like
non
to have.
corrisponde a quello che
Reality
secondo
doesn't
me
correspond to what
dovrebbe
I
essere.
think it should be.
E questa è la prima
And this
ragione
is
per
the
la quale
first
crediamo di
reason why
soffrire.
we think we suffer.
La seconda
The
ragione per la quale
second
crediamo di
reason
soffrire è perché
is
le
because
cose non è che non posso
it's
avere ciò
not
che
that
voglio,
I
è
can't
perché ho
have
quello
what I
che non
want.
voglio.
It's that I have what I don't want.
Io soffro perché
I'm
tu fai
suffering
così,
because you
perché l'altro
act
fa
like
cos'ha,
this, and
perché
he
questo
does
in
like
questo
this,
modo,
and
perché
because this is
quell'altro
in
in
this
quel
way,
modo.
and
Ci
that
sono
other thing
cose
is
che a
like
me non
this.
mi
There are
piacciono, il
things that
mondo
I
non è
don't
come
like. The
dovrebbe
world is
essere.
not the way it should
E
be.
ci sono tante cose
And
che non
there's
ci piacciono.
so many things that we don't
Quindi
like.
uno è
So
perché non posso avere
one
ciò
is
che
we
voglio e
can't
l'altro è perché
have what
devo
we
avere ciò che
want,
non voglio.
and then also I need to
E queste sono le due
experience what I don't
principali
like.
ragioni
These are
per
the
la quale
two
noi di
main
solito crediamo
reasons
di
why we
soffrire.
think we suffer.
E la terza
And the
ragione è
third
perché ci
reason
dobbiamo
is because we need to
inevitabilmente separare da
inevitably
ciò
be
che ci piace.
separated from what we like.
Situazioni,
Situations,
luoghi,
places,
persone,
people,
oggetti,
objects, right?
tutto ciò che comincia,
Everything that
non appena comincia,
begins, as soon
si
as it
avvicina verso
starts, it
la
moves
fine.
towards
È
the
naturale.
end. It's natural.
Però quando ci
But
dobbiamo separare
when
da
we need
qualcosa
to
che ci piace,
separate, we
cosa
be
facciamo?
separated
Ai,
from
che
what we
bello che c'è
like, do we
stato.
say, "Oh, how wonderful that I could experience
rimaniamo
that,"
male.
or are we sad?
Rimaniamo male di
Or
solito.
we're upset
Perciò noi
normally?
crediamo di
Because we
soffrire
believe that we
principalmente per queste tre
suffer for
ragioni.
these three
Perché non
reasons.
possiamo avere quello che
Because we
vogliamo,
can't have what we
perché ci
want,
dobbiamo,
because we
perché
have
dobbiamo avere quello
to
che non vogliamo,
experience
e
what we
perché
don't
ci
want,
dobbiamo
and
separare
we
da
need
quello
to
che
be
ci piace.
separated from what we
Ci
like.
siamo?
Do you follow?
ci riconosciamo
Do
in
we
questo?
recognize ourselves in this?
Adesso
But
filosofiamo
now
un po',
let's just
analizziamo un po'.
philosophize a little bit. Let's analyze.
È possibile
Is
avere
it
tutto quello che
possible
vogliamo?
to have everything that we want?
No? Ci hanno detto, più ne ho
I
e
mean,
più
there's a saying like the more
ne
I,
voglio.
the
E
more
poi io aggiungo una parte
the
che più ne voglio?
the more I have, the more I want. Because quantity, is it something objective or is it subjective based on comparison? Like a lot and a little. Depends on the value that I attribute it to it. So the more I want, the less I have. Once I was in Milan many, many years ago in a school. I had more time, more free time, and at that time where I was invited, I would go. And I got to this school in Milan, Maria Pizzigoni School, really beautiful school. In the city center, there's actually a little farm in that, and some of the teachers had invited me. We were in the school gymnasium, and there were about 200 children, like 5 to 6 years old, and the teachers around. And I looked at them. I said, "Oh, you know, what am I supposed to do now?" This is about 20 years ago. Anyway, so the teacher said, "No, explain Buddhism to them." I said, "How much time do I have?" They said, "An hour and a half." And then what am I going to do now? Okay, let's try. And I started to talk to children, basically what we're talking about today, in other words. But at first I learned something with children that I really liked. When you talk to small children, they answer in chorus all together, and it's really, really nice. And so I asked the children, is there something, a toy that you really want? And they answer, yes. Did it ever happen for your birthday or for Christmas that you were able to get the toy that you wanted? Yes. Were you happy? Yes. Do you still have the toy? Yes. Does it make you happy like it did before? No. Do you want another toy? Yes. How long will that make you happy, that new toy? A long time or just a short time? And they looked at me a little upset. They're like, "Oh, just a short time." I mean, and they weren't special children. We all know, since we're children, that material things it's just a trick, it's a trap, and we get something, we're happy for a while, but then that same object, is it able to sustain that level of happiness? No. So we want another, Once, and we get to the extreme. Once I was with a friend in Brazil who was about to get into his private plane, and he looked at me and he said in English, the only difference between big and small boys is the size of their toys. The only difference between big and small boys is the size of their toys. So we go from toy to toy, projecting our happiness onto one thing on another, knowing deeply that it's not going to uphold that happiness we want. So this first illusion is, I will be happy when I get what I want. Is that real or is that illusory? It's illusory. Because once I get what I want something else. Because the nature of desire is not satisfaction, is dissatisfaction. What brings satisfaction, one of the keys to happiness, is not getting the object of desire, but is giving worth to what we already have. Satisfaction comes by giving value to what we have, not by trying to get what we don't have. I don't know if this difference is clear. How do you give value to something? By thinking, by generating gratitude, by rejoicing. It's an important exercise. So the first trap, the first illusion that we follow, and it's a utopia, is believing that we can be happy by getting everything we want. It's a utopia that our society believes in deeply, because in our society, what's the indicator of things that are going well or not? The state of harmony within society, or the PIL, the PNL. We have the economy what's the definition of economy that is often taught at university? A friend, economist, explained to me this definition. There are many apparently, but one that the classic one is economy is the science that makes it so that the desires of man are satisfied, to satisfy the infinite desires of man with the finite resources of nature. And when I heard that, how can you satisfy infinite desires of man, of humans, with finite resources of nature? Tell me if that is not craziness. Is it possible to satisfy something that is finite? That's something that is infinite? But it is possible to destroy something that is finite. So we see how dangerous this utopia is, because believing that we can find a state of joy and happiness for everyone based on something that is illusory. But the problem is not in the lack of material resources, is in the nature of desire itself. Because the more I have, the more I want, the less I have, and the more I want, the more I will want. And if somebody asks, does money bring happiness? Yes, up to a certain point, though. Because if I don't have food to eat, if I don't have a safe place to live, if I can't take care of my health, my body when I'm sick, I can't educate my children, am I going to suffer more? Yes. Within the United Nations, they did research on this. Maybe some of you have seen, just about every year or maybe every 2 years, the United Nations, they do an international happiness report. It's a big book. I've never read all of it. I've skimmed it. And one year there was they did a research on world happiness, and the question of the scientific research was, the question was, does money bring happiness? And the conclusion was, that I share fully, the answer, yes, up to a certain point. If one is under this limit, one suffers more. If one is over that threshold, then it doesn't matter how much money one has. That threshold is about not worrying about one's own survival, not waking up in the morning and not knowing if one has food to eat. Because someone who's under that threshold will suffer more. Even if one of the masters of Lama Michel, I heard in a recorded teaching, because I didn't have the opportunity to meet him, he left his body in 1985. His name was Rinpoche, and he would say that suffering is of two types, mental and physical. Poor people suffer from physical problems, and rich people suffer from mental problems. But at the end of the day, they suffer the same. But the point is that material wealth is important. A sustainable, balanced economy is important, nothing against the economy, but let's remember that the economy should sustain our needs, not our desires, because our needs are finite, but our needs are infinite. And a key to our happiness, in my opinion, is being able to correctly discern between what I need and what I want. What I need to do everything possible to get what I need. As for what I desire, if it's there, good. If it's not there, fine too. Because when we become a slave of the wanting, then there's no exit. So believing that I will be happy when I can get everything I want is an illusion. Believing that I suffer because I need to live what I don't like. I mean, is that possible? Here's a question for you. Has it ever happened to wake up in the morning like on the wrong side of the bed, and even beautiful things that would normally be beautiful that day you don't like? So given that we just have a very short amount of time today, I'm going right to the point, which is the key to everything. As I'm speaking to you, what's happening? Even when the same thing happens when you speak to anyone. Here I have thoughts, I have feelings, and I'm transforming them into sound. This sound comes to each one of you. And you, what do you do with that sound? You attribute meaning. What I say and what you understand are two different things. But in any conversation, this is what happens. Because when we listen to someone who's speaking, to our ear, vibrations come to our ear, sounds, and to those sounds, we give meaning. So if I asked you, are you listening to sounds or words? I gave you, that was the same question. That in a different, in a language that Umsila, who's here, understands, but I think that most of you don't. So what happens that when someone's talking to us, in reality, we hear sounds. But I don't know if it's ever happened where you've said, where you have to discuss and you kind of fight about what has been said. You said this. No, I never said that. And here I give you some advice. Never say, you said. Say, I understood this. Because what the other person said, we do not know. Really. We know only what we think, what we remember, that we think we understood. I remember to have heard this. You know how many fewer problems you'll have if you do like that? Now, when we see something, we hear someone, none of us is able to perceive anything independently of oneself, of himself. We live reality through this filter of our person. It's like putting on rose-tinted glasses and I see a snow-capped mountain, and what color is the snow? Pink. And if I put on blue-tinted lenses, the snow is then blue. If one wakes up on the wrong side of the bed or the hormones upside down, the world is like that. I realized a short time ago, this summer, I had an allergic reaction that gave me a strong surge of adrenaline. I had to take cortisone that I had never taken, and I felt very nervous. There was something inside. I mean, things that never bothered me were starting to bother me, and I thought, this is so strange. And then I understood that it was a physiological reaction that I was having. And remember that the body and mind are always they go together. What happens in the body happens in the mind, and what happens in the mind, you can see that in the body. And we all, when we perceive anything, we perceive it through this filter of self, of culture, education, so many filters. Our education, our experiences that form our worldview. They're the filters of our physical state of being, etc. So when we see reality, what we're seeing is not reality, but it's our version of reality. This doesn't mean that reality doesn't exist. If we were to take all of, among all of you, we just take one person among you, and we all describe that person, there won't be there won't be two descriptions that are the same. People come to me and say, "Oh, Lama, no one understands me." I say, "Don't worry, no one will understand you ever. No one will ever see you the way you see yourself, ever." And then when someone sees ourselves as in a similar way to how we see ourselves, we feel understood, but we all perceive everything through this filter of ourselves, and as long as that filter is dirty, reality is dirty, and when those filters are clean, then the reality is clean. In other words, if I'm taken by anger, envy, fear, anxiety, jealousy, etc., I will see the world through those filters. If I'm in a state of love and satisfaction and gratitude, stability, joy, I'll see the world through those filters. So the saying that I suffer because I have to live things that I don't like, it's impossible to protect ourselves from every problem in the world. There's a saying in a very important text in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. I can't remember exactly the words, but the question is it possible to cover the surface of the globe with leather to be able to walk comfortably? And the answer is obviously no. Instead, but the answer, he says, Shantideva says, yes, you can, by putting on comfortable shoes. So if we cover our feet well, no matter where we walk, we're protected. And this means, on the other side, it's not possible to make the world the way we want it, where everything goes the way we want it, where there are no problems, and create this perfect world, let's say. It's just not possible. But it is possible by developing within the tools so that we can live the world harmoniously. This is possible. Like, we believe also because we need to be separated from what we love. If I like water, this is my water. And at a certain point, I'm drinking the water. I like it so much. And then it finishes. How wonderful that I had this water. It happened many times in my life to have even people to whom I had an enormous attachment who left their bodies. Lama Rinpoche, first and foremost, other masters too, and these people had an enormous importance. They still do. I remember the first time a master of mine left his body. Kachin Losang Sepa, he was a master of Lama Ganchen and also my own when I was in India. He was a man of love and wisdom like few I have ever met. It's said that he didn't have a shadow, and in the ancient texts, it's said that that's a sign of great realizations. And I would go to teachings, private teachings with him in India, and I had this amazing opportunity to have private lessons with him to learn even like the ABC of Buddhism. I was 10, I was 12 years old. You know, he taught me the basis of debate, and I had this good fortune because he was very close to Lama Ganchen, and he would be by the window, and there was a table full of objects like this, and I would be sitting there, and the sun would come through the window, and his body was almost like a window, you know. So he had very little shadow. And I even asked him once if it was true. They say that you don't have a shadow, and he pretended he didn't understand it, and he just didn't hear me, and we just went on with the lesson. So I had a very deep connection with him. And so when he left his body, at that first moment, I remember this great sadness, and I took a deep breath, and I started to remember the wonderful things that he transmitted to me, the moments that we shared. And I thought, how wonderful that I had this opportunity. What great luck, fortune that I've had. And the stronger than the sadness that I was feeling was the joy for what was, because the sadness we feel when someone dies, or when a beautiful moment ends, we need to be separated from something. It's not because a person has died or that situation is over, but it's because our own inability to accept the nature of things, the impermanence of things. What makes us suffer is that we're grasping to a permanent reality, when in reality it's impermanent and there's nothing wrong. The problem is not dying, and the problem is living badly. You know, and it's not a problem because there's no solution to dying. If it's a problem, then necessarily there has to be a solution. I mean, some look at death as a problem, and they're looking for a solution. There's companies in the United States, and they're doing research for to be able to live 150 years. They say by 2030, by year 2030, those who have enough money, they'll be able to live 150 years. I just imagine a person who's 150 years old, and can you imagine can you imagine the sessions with the psychologist? You know, I mean, all the accumulated traumas. So beyond that, what I mean to say is that the problem is not about dying. The problem is living badly. And when something ends, when the life of someone that we know, it ends. I mean, it's the nature of things. It's natural that there will be very strong emotions. As I was talking about Kachin Losang Punsak, or if I talk about Geshe Wanchuk, or Lama Ganchen, or Kapchen Dago Rinpoche, my masters who've left their bodies, Khenlak Pala, people who've had fundamental importance in my life. It's obvious that there's their emotions, but there's a deep sense of gratitude that brings great joy. So I drink this glass of water. When it finishes, how wonderful that I had it. What makes us suffer is this idealized image that it shouldn't end. I'm just giving you the essence of the essence here. Because, so, at the end of the day, what Buddha transmitted are four fundamental points, and let me just get straight to the point. Suffering is not just this feeling of mental or physical suffering, but there are things that we believe bring happiness but are of the nature of suffering. Suffering should be avoided. Avoided in the sense that we can't project our happiness onto these things. Material wealth, sensory these are things that shouldn't be avoided or eliminated, but we should give the right weight to it. Nothing against having things or having sensory pleasures or having a good image or recognition. Nothing wrong with any of these things, but using a term that's not Buddhist, but maybe you understand better. It's not a sin to have these things, but the problem is projecting our happiness onto these things that cannot sustain happiness. And Buddha also said that suffering is present. Suffering is present where the causes are present. The causes of suffering are present. So if we have this filter of dissatisfaction and sadness and envy and anxiety and anger, inevitably we're going to live our world through these feelings, and inevitably there will be suffering. So a fundamental point of Buddhism is that both happiness and suffering, they do not depend on the world around us, but on the way in which we experience this world. As we said before, material world is important to satisfy our material needs. We're not saying it's all in your mind. No, the body exists. Our physical state is real. But as long as there's dissatisfaction, anger, hate, resentment, sadness, anxiety, fear, arrogance, etc., there will be suffering. And so, what is the state of happiness? That in Buddhism, we use this term nirvana. What is nirvana beyond being a musical group? In addition to being a musical group, it's an inner state of being. It's not a place. Like the word Buddha. Nirvana is the state that a Buddha finds himself in. A Buddha is someone who developed maximum potential, his qualities like love, satisfaction, compassion, kindness, generosity, stability, wisdom, harmony, joy, developed his own qualities, the maximum potential, and as a consequence, he eliminated completely the so-called mental defilements, the causes of suffering, fear and envy, anger, etc. This is what a Buddha is. This is the state of nirvana. And I have to say that the first time that I believed in these words is when I came to Verbania. I don't know why, but I was in the car. I'd arrived at the airport. I was with Francesco and Gabriella. It was nighttime and it rained, but Francesco said, "But let's go along the lake." So I wasn't connected with something mystical. I mean, my mind was somewhere totally. My mind was completely somewhere else, but I don't know why. And in that moment, I understood something deeper. In Brazil, we say when the token falls, like those old, like the telephones, where you have to put in the token, it doesn't go, and then click, something works. And in that moment, I was about 18 years old, and I realized that problems exist and they will always exist. And I thought, wow, how wonderful.
Veramente mi ha dato gioia.
It really gave me
Perché la
joy
regola qual è?
because
Finisce
normally
un problema,
the rule is when
ne
one
comincia un
problem
altro. E
finishes,
cosa succede
another
quando c'è
one comes
l'eccezione
up,
che finisce un problema e non comincia un
and
altro?
i-
Lo creiamo noi.
and if by chance there
Questo
isn't a problem, then we create a
è
problem.
quello che
That's,
succede di
I
solito,
mean, that's
ok?
normally what happens.
E quando io capii,
And when
finisce un
I
problema, comincia un
understood
altro,
that when a
problemi ci sono e ci
problem
saranno sempre,
ends, a new one
mi
begins, a new
sono
one
detto
starts,
l'obiettivo
that there
della mia
always
vita non può essere risolvere i
that there will
problemi
always be
e
problems. I
cercare di
realized that
creare una realtà idealizzata di
the
come io
objective of
vorrei
my
che le
life
cose
cannot
fossero,
be
perché io
about
vivevo in
resolving
quell'illusione.
problems. I lived in that
Quindi mi
illusion
sono
of
detto, qual è
trying
il
to
mio obiettivo di
resolve
vita?
all problems so that I would be happy,
Personale, parlo per me
So here I'm
stesso,
talking for myself.
per me stesso il
For
mio obiettivo
myself,
è
my objective
essere in
is
armonia
to be
con
in
me stesso
harmony
e
with
con gli altri,
myself and with others,
indipendentemente di dove sono,
independently of
con
where
chi
I find
sono o in
myself, with
quale situazione mi
whom
trovo.
I find myself, and in
Perché
what
se la mia
situation I'm
felicità
in.
deve
Because if my
dipendere dalle
happiness
situazioni che
has
sono
to
intorno a me,
depend on the
siamo fregati
situations around me,
alla partenza, perché i
then
problemi ci sono e ci saranno
then
sempre,
I'm
difficoltà
in
ci
a
sono e
bad
ci saranno
state
sempre.
because there will
Io
always
conosco tanta
be
gente e non ho
problems and
mai conosciuto
difficulties.
una persona
I've met
che
many,
potesse
many
dire io
people,
non ho
and I've
problemi.
never known a single
Tutto
person
va
who could
esattamente
say,
come io voglio.
I don't have
Mai
problems.
conosciuto.
Everything goes
Mai.
exactly the
In
way I
qualunque
want
età.
it. I've never met anyone, regardless of
Perciò qual è
age,
l'obiettivo?
nothing. So what's the
È
objective?
vivere in uno stato
Is to
interiore
live
di
an
armonia,
inner state of
di
harmony,
pace,
of peace,
che ci permetta
that
di vivere il mondo
allows
intorno a
us
noi
to
con armonia.
live the world around us
Per fare questo
peacefully
ci
and
dobbiamo darle fare.
harmoniously. And to
E
get
qualcuno
there,
mi
we
direbbe,
need to
sì,
work.
bello, però è
You know,
difficile.
someone say, "Oh, well,
Sono
that's wonderful, but that
C'è un
sounds
proverbio
like
tibetano
hard
che dice
work."
Ya
Yes.
lama godap madena kubdap. Se ti alzi sbatti la
In
testa, se
Tibetan,
ti
they
abbassi
say,
sbatti il sedere.
if you stand up, you hit your head. If you sit down, you hit your tush.
Nel senso
In
che
in the sense that there's a Tibetan
è
proverb.
faticoso
It's
guardarsi negli
tiresome. It's
occhi e
tiresome to
affrontare
look
i propri traumi, affrontare la propria rabbia, la
look
propria
at ourselves
gelosia,
in
la
the
propria
mirror and
insoddisfazione,
face
cambiare le proprie
ourselves,
abitudini,
change our own
agire in un modo
habits,
diverso di quello
act
che ci viene
differently
spontaneo,
from
che
what
non
is
è virtuoso, cercare
spontaneous
di
to us and
agire in un
what is
modo
not
virtuoso anche se
to
non
what is
spontaneo.
not
È faticoso, no?
virtuous. I mean, it's
È
tiresome to
faticoso
look at our
cambiare
own
se stessi,
mental defilements,
affrontare la
to
vita con
change
responsabilità
ourselves, to
interiore.
face
È faticoso,
life
no?
with
Ma non farlo
with
e vivere come la vittima del
responsibility.
mondo è
But
faticoso, no?
I mean, that's tiresome.
Tanto.
But not doing that and living
Per quello che ho fatto
life
questo
as a
esempio.
victim, that's tiresome
Però è
too.
meglio faticare per
So
qualcosa
it's
che porta dei
better
buoni
to work
risultati, no?
hard for something that will bring positive results.
Almeno quello.
At least that.
E qua rientra il
And
quarto punto, che è il
here's that
sentiero.
fourth point, which is the
E
path.
qua Buddha ci disse
Buddha here
il
told us
percorso per
this
essere felici,
path
per raggiungere
to
questo sì.
reach this, to be
Questo è più che
happy.
Buddha, Lama Tsongkhapa, il
Lama
fondatore della
Tsongkhapa,
nostra
the
tradizione,
founder of
dopo
our
prendere tutti gli
tradition,
insegnamenti di
he
Buddha e
took all of Buddha's
riassunto in 3
teachings and
punti.
he summarized them into 3
Il
points.
percorso per
The
fare questo,
path
al di
to
là
get
della religione,
there,
o meno,
beyond, this goes beyond
è fatto di
religion.
3 parti.
It's made up of 3
Amare
parts.
se stessi,
Loving
che
oneself,
vuol dire
which means
riconoscere ciò che ci fa bene e
recognizing
coltivarlo.
recognizing what is good for us and cultivating that,
Riconoscere ciò che ci fa male e
recognizing what is
abbandonarlo.
harmful to us
Se
and
ognuno di noi
abandoning that. If
semplicemente
we
facesse la
simply
lista, che cosa mi
made
fa
a
bene e
list,
che cosa mi
what's
fa
good
male
for me,
nel mio
what's
modo di
bad for me,
comportarmi
in the way that
fisicamente,
I act.
verbalmente e mentalmente.
I act physically,
Quello che mi fa bene
verbally,
devo
and
coltivare,
mentally.
quello che mi fa male
And
devo
what is good for me,
abbandonare senza scuse.
I need to
Già faremo dei passi da giganti.
I need to do more of that.
Questo è il
And
primo
what is bad
passaggio,
for me, I
amare
need
se
to
stessi.
abandon that. That's that first
Secondo
step
passaggio,
of loving oneself.
amare gli altri.
And that second step is
Vedere
loving
la
others,
felicità degli altri
seeing
come essendo
others'
tanto
happiness
importante quanto la
as
nostra.
being as important as our
Ricordiamoci che
own,
amare
remembering that
l'altro,
loving
sviluppare
others,
l'altruismo,
developing
non esiste in
altruism, it does
opposizione
not exist
all'egoismo
in
di pensare solo a noi
opposition
stessi,
to
ma sì
thinking
come una
of ourselves.
evoluzione
But it's
del
actually
egoismo.
it's an evolution of
Perché l'egoismo nel
selfishness,
quale
because
siamo
selfishness is where
parlo
we are.
generalizzando.
selfishness is where we are, I'm generalizing, but it's where we live in this obsession with self-gratification, where the I and the my is the most important thing that exists. The evolution of selfishness is altruism, where I want to be happy, yes, but I want you to be happy too. Your happiness is as important to me as my own. Your suffering is as important to me as my own. And one of the keys to our happiness is love and compassion. And selfishly speaking, it's much, much better to be altruistic. The more we're obsessed with the I and the my, the more we will suffer, the more we're able to see others, take care of others, love others really, the happier we are. And that's the second part. Here there's generosity, many other important aspects. And that third part is about living life in a living reality as it is. And here I'll just say 2 words about this. The reality around us, everything that we see and perceive, is in constant transformation. Is it in constant transformation, or are they static things? You don't need a degree in philosophy to know, to see that everything's in constant transformation. But we meet someone, for example, and then we're going to see that person a week later. Who do we think we're going to meet? That's that person, or someone who's changed? No, that same person. Or rather, we live in an impermanent world that appears to us as being permanent, and we relate to that impermanent reality as if it were permanent. And then we get upset when the other one's changed, when it's in constant transformation. So a form of ignorance that needs to be overcome is seeing and experiencing an impermanent reality as being permanent, living something that is impermanent as being permanent. This is a form of ignorance. And wisdom is living that which is impermanent as being impermanent. There's correspondence. There's corresponding here. The other key to the correct view of reality is we live in a subjective reality where each one of us perceives everything through this filter of ourselves, as we said before. But even if we live in a subjective reality, this subjective reality, does it appear as being subjective, or does it appear as objective? Am I seeing my version of you, or am I seeing you? No, I'm seeing you. And if you say, I'm not like this, I say, no, that's not true. So we live in a subjective reality that appears as being objective, and we relate to it as if it were objective. This is another form of ignorance, and wisdom can be found in relating to the subjective reality as being subjective. And here's a little piece of advice. Before I said, we say, you don't ever say, this is like this. You can say, this seems to me like this, and your life will change. As we said before, like, don't say you said this, or I heard this. So this is about this is the essence, let's say. So we can change by taking commitments through morality, with using techniques like meditation, holy art, and the first point was about learning more. So this was just a very, very, very short introduction. We have so many activities today. I'm so happy to see you all today. It's a dream of Lama Michel to create this center. We're all here with our open arms. Sometimes people just ask, well, can you go? Can we come to the center? And maybe it seems as if we're a closed group, but that's not true. We are open to everyone without exception, and you don't have to be in one way or another. I mean, I don't want everyone to become Buddhist. It's the last thing that I that I that I want. I don't think it would be a better world if we were all Buddhists, because we're all different. We need different approaches. Everyone has his own culture, but I'm sure that the world would be much better if there was more love and respect and gratitude, less hate, less ignorance. So I'm not asking you to come here to become Buddhist, but I'm asking you to look inside yourself, victimize yourself less, take the responsibility of your own life, and try to be a positive interdependence in this world. So we each do our small part, which means a lot. So I thank you from the depth of my heart to be here today. And if there's something that something that you heard or something that you see that can be beneficial in your life, try to put it into practice. And you're always welcome. So it's now time for a small dedication, as our tradition has.
Drowe munsela takto ne gyur che kewa kunto yanda lama dang drame cheki pela long che ching sadan lamge yunde rabzo ne dorje change koba nyur toba sho nimo dele tsindele nime kuyan delek shin ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chingelo kuncho sumke ngodrubutso kuncho sumke trashisho possa la preziosamente pacifica che non è ancora nata
the precious peaceful mind that has not yet arisen
non degenerare
arise and grow. May that which has already arisen
di notte o durante il giorno
reinforce and grow forevermore. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to realize
una buona giornata.
And sprinkle the paths of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Una sola cosa pratica. Che visto che siamo anche in tanti, fra mezz'ora abbiamo in programma, fra 15 minuti, la pratica di meditazione dell'autoguarigione che guiderò. Okay? Era programmata nella sala, nel piano sopra, però secondo me saremo in tanti, quindi abbiamo fatto un cambio di programma e la faremo qui. Okay? E poi per fare saluti vari facciamo dopo, semmai per dare un po' adesso il momento per cominciare in orario. Okay? Grazie a tutti.
Any kind of greetings, we can do it after so that we can be on time.